Francesco, thank you very much indeed for that introduction. And ladies and gentlemen, let me begin by thanking the Foreign Policy Association for this very great honor. I know it is an honor that comes principally to NYU for its incredible role in outreach to the world. I'll come back to that in a few moments, but it's also a great personal pleasure for me to accept that honor. And Francesco, thank you for those words. Our links to Italy are strong. Our links to Italy grow ever stronger every year. And it's a delight to have the partnership with you here in New York, but also with your counterparts in Florence and beyond. You know, ladies and gentlemen, you know, to be standing on the stage here tonight and with such other distinguished honorees is a great pleasure indeed. And let me say, particularly, let me single out one of the other honorees. For me, it's a huge pleasure to join Rami Koch. We'll be hearing about Rami Koch a little later on. I have the huge privilege of being on an international advisory board for a truly remarkable educational institution that Rami and his family have created in Istanbul. It is Koç University. It's one of the finest young universities in the world. And it's creating the next generation of young people who will go out and do great things in Turkey and far beyond the borders of Turkey. But let me also comment, I'm sure many of you have been driving or walking around Manhattan during this afternoon and yesterday. And there's one thing you will have noticed. You will have noticed many young people wearing brightly colored gowns. Have you seen that throughout New York City? There are a few light blue gowns. You know, there's some college in the far north of Manhattan that has light blue as its color, and there's been a few of those. It's a minor college, but there's been a few of those around, but you'll also have noticed a very large number of very prominent violet gowns, particularly if you strayed downtown or into Brooklyn, where I was this afternoon. And ladies and gentlemen, this week, if you haven't noticed, is graduation week. And so I stand here in front of you with a right hand that has shaken nearly 2,000 hands today. And have no fear, any of you who I have greeted this evening, I did wash my hand before coming here this evening. But graduation week is a very special week in every university. It's a special week at NYU, and it's that moment in the year, of course, where we send out those people who came to us, those young people who came to a university at the age of 18, young and immature, and who have been influenced, matured, grown during their time at the university, and we send them out into the world. And why am I saying that? Because obviously tonight we celebrate foreign policy. We celebrate foreign interactions, collaborations, and partnerships. And to me, this week, as we've seen all of these young people around New York City getting ready to go out into the world, it's so important that we recognize the international dimension of that. And of course, that international dimension has many different elements. Of course, as you see those students around Manhattan, many of them will not be Americans. They are graduating wearing those light blue abominations from uptown, or wearing the violet, beautiful violet of NYU. But many of them will be from outside this country. And I think, I know that I'm very much talking to the choir on an evening like this, but in this current world, we're facing quite a number of challenges as we seek to strengthen, as we seek to enhance international collaboration and the building of bridges at every opportunity, quite frankly, rather than the building of walls to the world. And for me, as we face a challenge, and we're seeing it, we've had travel bans in the last few years, we've had a real focus on China, and I'll come back to China in a few moments. But, just step back a little bit and look at what the international students who come to America, the international young people who come and become ensconced and engaged in this country. International students at US universities contribute $40 billion a year annually to the economy of this country. And that's not even taking account of the soft diplomacy value of their presence in this country, and then the potential as they go back to their home countries or elsewhere, and the great love and knowledge and collaboration opportunities that they bring for the United States. We bring amazing young people from around the world, and it was instructive. I'm a scientist, as you heard from Francesco's words. I'm a chemistry professor, but I love to watch the Nobel Prizes as they come through. And just to take one example, in 2016, all of the physics Nobel Prize winners, the 3 physics Nobel Prize winners, were all at American universities, so all claimed by America. Every single one of them was an immigrant. Every single one was someone who came as a young person to this country to be educated and then to contribute in so many different ways to this country. We are seeing a real threat, and I think for all of us in education, that threat is something we take seriously. We respond through our organizations, the AAU or the ACE in particular, the American Association of Universities or the American Council for Education. Both of them are lobby groups in Washington to really press the value of those young people who come from around the world to America and who then bring great influence, knowledge, and impact with them, but of course go out into the world with that special link to America, which is invaluable. That's, in a sense, one dimension of the role of a university. And my life at NYU began 3.5 years ago in early 2016. And as you heard from Francesco, prior to that, I was the Vice Chancellor, the President of Oxford University. Well, NYU is 190 years old. Oxford University is 850 years old. I used to tell my colleagues in Oxford, they would come to me and they would say, Andy, this is a major crisis. I was there in 2010, and the financial crisis, Andy, this is a major crisis. And I said, come on, calm down. This isn't a crisis. Serious, yes. It's not a crisis. If you want a real crisis, the bubonic plague, that was a real crisis. And I say that because universities are very, very special places. Do not take them for granted. Tell me another institution that has existed for 850 years, essentially in an unchanged form. The only one I can come up with, forgive me, is the Catholic Church. And the Catholic Church requires celibacy, and that can be a challenge in a modern American university. I will say that It's vital for universities to maintain that long-term view. We have our day-to-day, we have our week-to-week and month-to-month challenges. We have pressures in Washington, in London, God forbid, right now, challenges to the world of international engagement. But when you have an 850-year-old institution, or like NYU, a 190-year-old institution, our focus has to be on the long term. And I'm very proud to be the president of NYU, because this is a university that over many decades has focused on the long term. 60 years ago, NYU opened its first international campus. It was in Madrid. 60 years ago, 1958, Franco was in power. It was a very controversial move at that time. I'm not sure NYU can take full credit for the return of democracy to Spain. However, it certainly didn't do any harm in making that link to the Western world that was so important as Spain came into the late 20th century and beyond. And so the first NYU overseas site was in Madrid. A few years later, it was in Paris. As you've heard from Francesco, in the late 1990s, we opened a glorious site in Florence, La Pietra, and that has become NYU Florence. And then something really rather wonderful happened. About a decade, maybe 12 years ago now, a former recipient of the FPA medal, my wonderful predecessor, John Sexton, president of NYU, was the visionary who opened NYU's first major campus abroad. It was in Abu Dhabi. And the campus in Abu Dhabi is thriving. Jenny, my wife Jenny, and I on Monday will be there for their graduation ceremony. And the campus in Abu Dhabi has about 1,700 students, and those students come from 130 different countries. There is no majority. The largest percentage is Emirati, who are 15%. The next is American, who are 14% of the population. The remaining 71% come from 128 other countries. It is a truly remarkable educational institution where young people are learning to work through and for and around difference. They are engaging with different cultures, different religions, different perspectives. And NYU created that campus in partnership with the government of Abu Dhabi. Already in the past 5 years, we've had 12 Rhodes Scholars come from NYU Abu Dhabi. We now have Schwarzman Scholars, we have Fulbright Scholars, we have an incredible range of successful young people graduating from that campus in a foreign land. And NYU, and again, my predecessor John Sexton was so inspired that 4 years later, we opened our second major campus abroad, which is NYU Shanghai, particularly relevant for this modern era where we are seeing such focus. Kyle, in his words earlier on, mentioned the challenge we have with China. NYU Shanghai has nearly 2,000 students studying today. Half of them are Chinese, half of them are international. Every freshman is paired, a Chinese freshman is paired with an international freshman in their dorm room. For the Chinese students, English is compulsory. For the international students, Mandarin is compulsory. There is no better opportunity to bring these two countries together, young people together, living, understanding each other's language, understanding each other's culture. Again, is it an easy place to be right now? with the kind of pressure that we're hearing in Washington, D.C. about the links of universities to China, the potential loss of intellectual property to China. It's not an easy place to be. But I would argue again and again and again that universities have to be about the long term. Oxford, NYU, and all of the great universities, even Columbia, has its focus on the future. We are very important in the long-term stability, the long-term collaborations and interactions that are created by young people when they get to know each other, when they study with each other, when they develop friendships with each other. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I could not be more honored to receive the FPA medal today. I do so on behalf of a university that could not be more committed. I mentioned Abu Dhabi and Shanghai, but we actually have 11 other sites. You know, we have London, Paris, Berlin, Prague, Florence, Madrid, Buenos Aires, Accra, Tel Aviv, and Sydney. We also have a site, an NYU site, in the city that I like to call the most foreign and hard to penetrate city in the world today, and that's of course NYU Washington DC. But that is part of the purpose of this network. It's to ensure that our students connect and engage with the world. And I don't think there's another university president in the world who can say that I travel, with some difficulty I will say, but I still travel from our campus in the Arab world to our campus in Israel. And that is an incredibly important thing for the future. It's an incredibly important thing for education. And I'm delighted to know now that it's also an incredibly important thing for the Foreign Policy Association. Thank you very much indeed.